Well, this is Morning Live. Thanks so much for staying with us as we continue talking about energy and power. And at this stage, there seems to be no end in sight to the country's electricity problems. And currently, all eyes are on the much anticipated final draft of the Integrated Resource Plan, or IRP. And last year, the Minister of Energy introduced the draft IRP, which is the government's energy plan until 2030. And he said that electricity generation and distribution landscape in South Africa was changing at a rapid pace amongst other issues. So with us this morning is Tebogo Movundlela, and she is the chairperson of the South African Wind Energy Association. Thanks so much for speaking to us.
Morning, Sakina. Thank you for having me.
So when the minister talks about this very fast changing landscape in the energy sector, we go back to the 2010 integrated energy plan. And it would seem that we didn't even meet those targets. So what exactly is the minister saying, and how are we to understand his utterances?
Sure. So, I mean, you're quite correct. So the last integrated resource plan that was finalized or promulgated was in 2010. And, I mean, the landscape has indeed been moving quite rapidly in terms of change. For example, when you look at renewable energy prices, those have dropped by over 50%. We're now sitting with an average price of about 65 cents per kilowatt hour as an average price for wind and PV. In the same time, the efficiencies of those technologies have also significantly changed. Climate change has gained tremendous momentum during that time. So, I mean, when we're looking at at the moment, the Integrated Resource Plan of 2018, the draft is currently at play. It's currently being reviewed by NEDLAC with the hope that it will be finalized quite soon. But, even in that plan, I mean, we're seeing, again, a commitment to an energy mix and definitely a commitment to renewable energy. The minister has said in the past that this is a living plan, and indeed it is, because it's such a dynamic environment that we exist in. And I think there's general consensus as well that, instead of waiting for such a long time, between 2010 as an example and 2018, to revise the plan because of the dynamic environment that we exist in, that the plan should be revised more regularly.
Let's drill down to more practical matters right now as it pertains to energy and cost. Now, you mentioned renewables and the cost having reduced significantly since 2010. So 65 cents is what you said?
The average price.
The average price. And at what price is it sold to Eskom, though? Because they then sell it on to us as the consumers.
Yes, so I mean, when I say that is the price that it's sold to Eskom. And I mean, Eskom has got its own mechanism where through NERSA they recover those costs through the tariff scheme.
So 65 cents to Eskom at the moment. And how much energy is being sold through renewables to Eskom at the moment?
So at the moment, what we have is about 4,000 megawatts of renewable energy that's been connected to the grid. We have, obviously, at the moment, around 4 projects that are currently being constructed. And that is about another 2,000 odd more megawatts that will be connected to the grid in the next year or two.
So is it currently being sold, or will it still be sold in the next year or two?
So the 4,000 megawatts is currently being sold, and then there's plants that are currently under construction, which will then, that energy will be sold to Eskom.
So how much more energy are we looking at over the foreseeable future?
So excluding the round, the current, let's call it 6,000 megawatts that have been procured. In terms of the draft 2018 plan, there's been quite a bit of allocation that is foreseen for renewables. I know specifically for wind, as an example, the draft does foresee something in the region of 14,000 megawatts leading up to 2030.
So just getting back to that integrated plan now. So what are the key objectives of this plan?
So, I mean, when renewables were introduced in the 2010 integrated resource plan. I mean, the aim was, we were coming off like a very dynamic sector at that time. We just experienced the 2008 electricity crisis. Government had already made commitments to climate change. And, renewables were seen as, a good and viable option in terms of introducing, or having at least an energy mix into the country. I think what we are seeing as an objective is, of course, to diversify the energy mix, to reduce the dependence on coal, to meet our climate change commitments, to have cost-effective energy that is produced by the country. I think a nice element of the renewable energy sector is that it speaks quite nicely to the National Development Plan objectives. What we see is a big contribution by renewable energy power plants, where up to now, close to about 1 billion has been contributed in terms of community upliftment programs and enterprise development.
But of course, that integrated mix will have to be managed quite sensitively, given what is at stake, because part of the objectives would look at the whole issue of jobs in terms of creation and also losses, and trying to actually, stabilize one way or another in that particular aspect. And we know that the unions have been crying foul over the renewable energy sector, seemingly muscling in very heavily at the expense of coal, perhaps at this stage. And some people have even said, if you look at a country like China, for example, they're not going to jump immediately to get rid of coal if that is still working for them. Why is South Africa in such a great hurry to move towards the renewable space?
I don't think we're in a great hurry. If we're looking at 4,000 megawatts that's currently being connected to the grid in terms of renewables, that is, quite a small portion of the total capacity of the country. It's less than 10%. And, again, with the integrated resource plan, it sees a gradual, increase in renewables going into the future. And you're quite right, Sakina. It is a dynamic topic, and it is a sensitive topic. We do live in a country with high employment rates, so we need to manage this transition quite well. And that takes, it's going to take coordination between private and public sector and planning as well, so that we can be preemptive of the issues rather than reacting to a crisis.
So looking at the situation at the moment, and we've just come off yet another series of rolling energy interruptions, power blackouts, if you will. And what do you think is the most threatening aspect right now to reverse energy access gains that have been made to date?
I think the biggest threat is probably lack of planning and lack of coordination. We talk about the energy crisis of 2008. I think, again, with a public and private, dialogue that is open and transparent, we can plan better in terms of our energy resources going forward. As an example, as part of our comments as the South African Wind Energy Association, is that, we recommended that there should be a smoother procurement of renewables, instead of, a stop-start that was initially envisaged in the original draft of the 2018 integrated resource plan. I think, the threat is planning and consistency. A lot can be realized from renewables. Already, there's been a significant investment in terms of foreign direct investment, which has been quite positive. In light of the economic growth that we've been experiencing, there's been jobs realized in renewables, and of course, there's the environmental benefits. So if we do have a consistent, rollout of renewables that is planned and that is transparent, we can see those benefits amplified going forward.
So how do you counter an argument that says we as a country said we can't afford a nuclear build? It was contained in the integrated energy plan, and it was said it needed to be pushed back, I think, until 2030 27, somewhere around there, or at least the initial phases of that needed to start being looked at in 2017. But that had to be pushed back according to the energy integrated plan. So how do you argue then against those who say, if you couldn't afford that, how then can you afford the IPPs, especially given how the procurement took place once the administration had changed within the African National Congress?
I mean, I get the prices of renewables have dropped quite a lot. I mean, when I say 65 cents, I mean, that is competitive to new build coal. And we're going to see prices continue to drop. I mean, as I said, there's a lot of, research and development that goes into renewables in terms of technology and the efficiencies. We're going to see prices continue to fall, and it's going to be, it's already quite cost competitive compared to other technologies.
Well, of course, this is a conversation that is ongoing, one that we'll talk about much more in various facets. But thanks so much for stopping by this morning. Tebogo Movundlela, she is the chair of the South African Wind Energy Association, talking about the much anticipated integrated resource plan. And it is anticipated that it will be finalized soon. So we'll leave that there for a moment. We'll take a break. And after that,